We, just so everyone knows, are recording this call. We are probably, when we kick off here in a minute, I'm going to go through just a few quick slides that cover a few kind of overarching goals, the different phases of the project, some changes that we've made recently that you may or may not have seen that rolled out. Some of them rolled out as early as this week or as recent as this week. And then I want to cover some questions. I'll go ahead and jump in and cover some things that people had asked about in the notes when they registered for this. Because so many people registered for this, we are probably going to, if Haley hasn't done it already, we're going to either ask you to mute or we're going to mute everybody. And if you have questions when we get to the question time, we'll ask you to raise your hand. And Haley has a way where she can see who has raised their hand. I think it puts you at the top of her list, and then she can unmute you so that you can ask questions. So thank you for joining us today on this finance roundtable. I know I personally looked at every one of the registrations that came through for this, and there were some good questions submitted, and we took some of that feedback and actually we made some changes already based on some of that. So Haley, you think we're good to jump in?
I think so.
Are people still joining?
I think it's good to go ahead and get started.
Okay. So hopefully everybody on this call actually joined for maybe one of our previous webinars. I think it was back in May where we actually covered a lot of this. So what I'm going to cover here on these first few slides are a lot of kind of recap of what we talked about before, which is kind of the different phases of the project, different goals of the project. So myself and Mike will be kind of leading this, and Haley's helping us facilitate questions and kind of manage the group here for us. So real quick, so if you were on the webinar, we talked about what are the goals of some of these changes, and some people, as you've submitted either help desk tickets or enhancement requests or different feedback, have said you kind of what was the impetus to this? Why did this have to change? There's a number of reasons why. We, from a technical standpoint, if you were at our summit last year, one of the things that our head developer talked about is changing, updating some of the code base to future-proof things and make things performant as we move forward. We're not dealing necessarily with specific performant issues related to finance, but we are trying to make this as fast and as speedy as possible for you, and especially for our bigger churches that have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of contributions or transactions in a year. We just want to ensure that this is as fast as it can be. And so we're utilizing some new back-end methodologies for that. And so some of that was the impetus, but the main impetus is we wanted to improve the user interface, provide a easier user interface. We wanted to separate out pledges for pledge management to be easier. Some new features that have been requested, like soft credits, registration credits, better bank check scanning, being able to handle non-contributions. We wanted to simplify the reconciliation process, and you might be wondering, it hasn't done that yet. That's coming in phase 2, which we're really close to, and I'm going to talk about. Some of these things have been done. Not all of them have been rolled out, like soft credits is coming in phase 2. I'll talk about that. And then combining contributions and transactions, which just makes the whole process of searching and viewing everything that you're working on much easier. And so there's a new UI coming to that as well. So this is rolling out in different phases. So phase 1 is what you're seeing now, which is we standardize account codes. That's a new feature. Should hopefully make reporting easier, making managing all of your event registration payments easier. The next piece of this is a new batch search page. So hopefully now as you can actually do mass things in that, and you can select which batches you want to see, which helps you run some new reports and just simplify the way all of that is done. The new batch entry page, which now has rolled out with registration credit, bank check scanning is easier, and has the ability to scan non-contributions in. And then the last piece in phase 1 was new pledge management. So that is all that is rolled out. So if you haven't seen any of those features, happy to talk about more of those in specifics. But that is phase 1. Phase 2, which is we are really close to wrapping up the work on. Oh, sorry. We have heard your feedback, and we rolled out a number of those changes to phase 1 that you hopefully saw a blog about. I'm not covering all of the changes that are in that blog. There's about 10 or 12 things, but we rolled out some additional changes this week, including the ability to do inline editing, which I'll show you here in a minute, which allows you to do notes per split. We brought back the enter key to tab. This has been a widely requested thing. Was a little bit of an oversight on my part. I will own it. I thought people were using the tab feature, and all of our early testers, all of them were using tab. Nobody was using enter. So that is now possible, where you can enter through, and you shouldn't need to use a mouse when entering things. And I can show you a demo of that, but that rolled out this week. Pledges, when we first rolled out the new pledge management page, it was not grouping things by household if you're a joint giver. Now that is happening. So we updated, some of the numbers have changed on the pledge reporting page so that they report based on household. So if you're using that, you can check that out. The pledge fulfillment report, we heard, was a little harder to find where we moved it. So we added it back where it used to be. So on the fund management page, you can now find the pledge fulfillment page. And even though the batch reports are available on the batch search page, we had removed that functionality on the batch page, and we've added that back in now, and I'll show you where that is. So if you are used to using the batch report while you're actually on the batch page instead of on the search page, you can do that. So, and then the view all for check images and being able to edit check in routing number, those things were added, I think, several weeks ago, and along with a number of other things. So those are some additional things, and I'll showcase some of those here in a minute, but I just want to go through phase 2 and phase 3 real quick. Phase 2 is that all online transactions are going to show batches. So this means not only contributions, but event registrations are going to go into batches as well. And that is for the purpose of allowing all the batches to be grouped by settlement or deposit date. So you will no longer need the settlements report, or if you're familiar with the, what did we call it before settlements, Mike? The
batch report.
No.
Oh, the reconcile report.
The reconcile report. You should not need that after we finish phase 2, because your batches, all of your transactions will show in a pending state until they settle. And then once they settle, they will show by the batch date. So it should just make reconciliation super easy for you. Soft credits. I was actually testing that this morning. That work is all done. Really exciting. And this is the ability, if you have people donating through foundations and you need to be able to give somebody, the example I always give, and I don't have a foundation, but let's say the Dolan Foundation made a gift and you needed to give me the credit for that gift, you could associate me and I would get credit towards my pledge. And you have the ability to show that on a statement in a separate section that shows that is clearly a not tax deductible thing, but it is a soft credit, and it shows on their contributions tab as well. So that is part of phase 2. And then we reworked fund sets. A lot of churches were using this, and you had to configure that through some special content files. We've now created a GUI, a graphic user interface, to basically be able to group your funds very easily if you use funds. So a use case of that might be if you just want to see all of your campaign funds together, or all of your general funds together, or all of your certain campus funds together, or something like that. It's used a lot for, if you run different statement types, or if you have, say, a different foundation or different locations. So anyway, that is going to be much easier to manage as part of phase 2 as well. And then phase 3 is where we're combining contributions and transactions. So you've already seen a few changes to this already in the contribution search, where now you can see non-contribution items in there. We've changed some of the filters, where some of the filters used to be redundant, and now we're simplifying that, where it'll be easier to find exactly what you're looking for, and all of that will be in one place. So before I turn it over for questions, I am going to, just show you a few of those things, but I've got to get out of my slideshow. So let's see here. If I go in here now to a batch, I'm going to go here. Oh, looks like I don't have one that's open. So I'm just going to go into this and I'm going to reopen this batch. You'll now see that we've added inline editing here. So if I go in here and I actually just add a contribution here for $100, but you'll notice I didn't fill anything else out. You will now see the ability to, it'll show in red here that the name is not selected. And I could go through here and I could change this if that was a non-tax deductible, or I could change the fund. If I change this to non-contribution, it's going to switch to account code there. I can change the amount, the check number. I could even put a note in there as well. And this pulls up the search. So if you're used to searching by different criteria, you know, with the advanced search, you can do that here as well. And if you have a check image that pulled in on that, it will show up on this page. That is one big thing. Another thing here that I showed you is that batch report. So that batch report is now visible here, if that's where you're used to doing this. One thing I do want to call out on this, if I go back here to the list, is that there's two versions of the batch report. There's the individual batch report, which is visible here for each batch. And then there's the multi-batch report, which is what you get when you check the 3 checkboxes and you hit report here. Those are configured in your, sorry, I'm having to move my Zoom controls around, in your settings. Under batches, you have the ability to customize the batch report or the multi-batch report. We have several different examples of those. So if you don't like the way the standard default one is, we have several different versions of it, and we've created more as we've gone here. So there's a batch report, there's a batch report 2, batch report 3. So the batch report, I think, gives you detail. Batch report 3, I think, gives you a summary view. Our batch report 2 gives you a summary view, and batch report 3 breaks it down by the date of the actual transactions happening. So there's several different views, including the ability to add an export to Excel button there. And so this documentation walks you through exactly how to add this to your database. It's super easy, but I just wanted to point that out here real quick. And then the other thing I just wanted to show you, back on this open item, is if I'm adding an entry now, the whole enter key going through the different items, and being able to add multiple items there without having to enter, click on the mouse. So hopefully that is a big enhancement there. And then I mentioned before that under the fund management, we added back the link to the fulfillment report. And on the pledges page, now these numbers are pulling in based on joint pledging. So I think that's everything I wanted to cover. Those were a number of things that I know were called out in some of the questions or comments. So I wanted to pay some special attention to those, but really the rest of the time here is open for you all. I'd love to hear your feedback, your questions. I see that Dava was first, and I'll let Haley do the next one, but I see Dava's hand first there. So.
And David, I'm not sure, is the question the one that you typed in the chat?
It is not.
Okay.
It is not. It is about so not just the contributions are going to be batched, but the other transactions like registrations and such are going to be batched, which I love, but I just want to make sure that they're not going to be combined.
They won't. So if you use 2 different payment gateways, so I would say the vast majority of our churches, probably 90%, use one payment gateway for online registrations and online giving. But in the case, Dave, I know you all specifically use one for online giving and one for event registrations. That's totally fine. If that's the case, you will have 4 batches per day, and it'll be 2 for online giving, 1 for ACH, 1 for credit card or bank cards, And then 2 for online registrations, again, ACH and bank card.
Okay. I'm good with that. I just need those to not combine. So,
Yep. And I'll just call it out because I see some other folks on the call that even use multiple gateways. And so if you have 3 or 4 gateways, which I know at least 1 or 2 people on this call do, it will be 2 per gateway, basically.
perfect.
But that way those batches will match what should show in your bank account, and
Perfect.
just make the reconciliation super easy.
All right, next is Allison.
It looks like. Yeah.
Hey, good afternoon, I guess it is. Mine has to do with alphabetical order. When you're looking at the pledge report, the order it comes in when I first click on it, I'm not sure what order it is. It might be people ID order. But if I want it in order by the last name, how do I do that? And there's another report, I don't remember where it was, but I like things by people's last names because that's typically how you list. When you're making a list of people, you put them in order by last name. So how do I get this
So
alphabetical by last name?
Great question. Just to answer the first question, they are sorted currently when you first load the page based on the pledge date. So your most recent pledges will show at the top.
Okay.
Each of these column headers can be sorted. So if you want to click on them, they can sort.
Right.
But it looks like that's sorting by first name instead of last name.
Yes, it is.
We do have the ability to do an export, and that will export everything on the page. And when you do that, it does break them, the first name and last name, out separately. And then you could sort by this, but I imagine you're probably wanting this page sorted.
That would be really nice. And I don't remember where the other thing was that I was trying to get by last name, and it wouldn't let me do it.
Okay. I will need to circle back with developer on that. I don't know. I know we tried to make all these new reports be sortable by the different column headers. That's something we're just trying to do as we add new
which is really
functionality.
good. I appreciate that.
Yeah. And I think I just have to see what's possible here. And we'll just have to, we'll write this down as feedback, and we'll circle back and see what we're able to do.
Okay. And so to export it, I just click on the word export.
Yep. And that will export it. And then
and then I can sort it by last name, but
yeah,
it would be really nice to do it here. So
you can search by last name. So if I wanted to see, all the triplet, I could see, and there's Drew triplet or something like that.
He's quite the pledger.
Yeah, he's one of our testers.
Okay, that's my main thing right now.
So we'll write that down, Allison, and we will have to circle back after we see what's possible.
All righty, thank you.
Yep.
And Chris, since we don't.
Yeah, Haley, go ahead.
Since we don't have anybody else raise their hand yet, David had put a question in the chat. Do you have the ability to show what the batch reports look like?
What the different batch reports look like? Yes. So let me go back to batch 1. So batch 1, and Mike helped write all these. So you can speak to this better, but here is a screenshot example. And so this one is actually showing you the bundle information up at the top. And then it's showing you the totals by fund. So this would be $105.75 for the budget local operation, but it's actually giving you the detail of each donor. So that's kind of one version of it.
Actually, Chris, on this one, this was more of a legacy report, and it breaks things out by cash or check. So limited use probably for most people for this particular batch report.
batch report 2, is this the one that so this one, Mike, what's the difference here? This one
Yeah,
is
now this one is subtotaled by fund.
subtotal by fund,
Yes.
and it has the name, so it has the detail.
Mhm.
And then batch report 3, this one I imagine is what a lot of churches are going to use. It's a summary. It gives you your general ledger from the settings. Isn't there one, Mike, that has the breakout per day?
Per
of the
day,
contribution?
that's one of the multi-batch reports. Yes.
That's right. That's right. Okay, so let me go and find that.
Would there be a way to get that to do a breakout per week?
Uh,
Like a
It's
day?
certainly possible. Yeah, we don't have a report like that yet, but that is a possibility.
If I could do that, I could get rid of my Excel sheet.
So is that batch report, multi-batch report 1, Mike?
Um,
Yes. So
Yes,
here you
okay.
go. It summarizes all the batch items at the top because you're again running this on multiple.
Right.
And then it's breaking it out per day. So on the 24th, you had a total of $72.83, which was to these 3 funds. So there, Dava, it is possible to do various versions. If there's probably the best thing is if you had kind of a mock-up of kind of what you were thinking, that might help us develop that. And
Well,
we'll look at
Actually, like this, like the top of that. If I could, if I could get it to look like that for the week. Well, no, I'm sorry. That's not what I thought that was. If I could get like per fund for the week, like if I put in, like I usually post like from Monday to Sunday, right? So if I could have what came in fund wise that week.
in that case, Dava, I think we've already got that. And what you would do here is you would do the multi-batch report 3. And it's giving you a summary of the funds. And you would just select, you would go over to your batch page. And you would put in a date range of, say, just a week. So if I put in a date range of a week and I filter, then, well, it's a bad use case there because apparently, let me put in 2 weeks here. So there we go. Let's say that's 1 week's worth of batches.
Okay.
And I would select all of these and I would hit report. And if you're using the batch report 3, then it would summarize those by fund. And that would get you exactly what you're looking for.
Okay, so right now my online batches don't have deposit dates on them. Is that because I have that thing that's going in and closing them automatically?
Yes, and when phase 2 rolls out, they will have the deposit dates automatically on there.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
There is, I think, something you can add to that script, Dava, that I think puts in the deposit date.
Okay. Can you email it to us?
Mike, am I speaking correctly on that? Are we able to do that with a script to put the deposit date in there?
We should be able to. I will take a look at your script and see if I can add that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Jeffrey was next. He asked about, and I'm looking in the chat here. Is there going to be the delete button? He said he only sees the delete button for newly made contributions if we need to delete one from previous days or weeks. So Chris, can you touch on that? Is that for just batches that are still open that have the delete option? Is that what the difference is?
Yeah, great question. So in this case, you're actually not seeing a trash can next to any of these unless I go in here and I go and add a new batch.
I think he's talking about the contributions themselves, not the batches.
Gotcha. So let me go back into one, clear this. So it's only going to let you delete a batch that has no contributions in it. So that's a safeguard, because we had churches that would delete a batch and then they'd say, well, where'd all those contributions go? And it's like, so we try to put a little bit of a safeguard that you can only delete batches without contributions.
Can you
One
touch on
thing-
deleting the contributions, the
Yep,
line
I
item?
will.
Okay.
Okay. So one thing that we are looking at doing, and we are likely going to do as a kind of a tag on to phase 2, is that if you're in here, that we might add the ability to do a mass delete, if that's something. I'm actually curious to hear feedback. So if people want to give a bunch of thumbs up for that, which would allow you to kind of mass delete things and then delete the bundle. You can only delete things, to Jeffrey's question, Haley, you are only able to delete things out of open batches. Once it's closed, you can't delete it.
Also address the issue of online batches.
Yeah. So that's the other thing. And is it, we've made it so that you can't delete online ones because it's something that actually happened and processed online. That is something I'm curious if people, we're having we're internally debating and getting feedback. And so I'd love your feedback on this. Our thought in phase 2 is that we're going to lock down where you can't change the amount and the date. And you can't delete an online one, but you could, if an online one was associated, say, to the wrong person, you could change the person, or you could change the fund. If somebody called and said, oops, I gave to the general fund, I really meant to give to the capital campaign, we are going to let you make those changes for sure. It's a balance between, we've heard people mess things up by giving them too much freedom, but we also don't want to take away things, so it's like, it's this internal debate where we've settled right now is kind of, we're thinking that you're not going to be able to delete online, change the date, or change the amount, because technically that's the amount of the contribution that processed. So if people have thoughts on that, they can either feel free to, if you don't want to raise your voice, you can email me, or you can put things in the chat here. So I don't know if that answers your question, Jeffrey, if you have specific follow-ups there.
There is another question after Jeffrey. Will you please clarify a point with online activity in regard to when phase 2 rolls out? Will we see 2 batches per day, one for online giving and one for registrations?
So it depends on how your church has things set up. So the vast majority of our churches, I think 90% or so, have one payment gateway for all of their online giving and all of their online registrations. In that case, you will see 2 batches per day, but the 2 batches will be one for ACH and one for cards, debit and credit, because that is the way that they are batched by the processors. If you are one of the churches that has a separate payment gateway for online registrations and a separate one for online giving, then you will have 4 a day, 2 that are for online giving, one for ACH, one for bank cards, and then 2 for whatever the other one I didn't say was, one for ACH and one for bank cards. So hopefully that clarifies things. What you should note, though, is as you're processing those, or as you're seeing those, you'll be able to clearly see which ones are tax deductible versus non-contributions. So even though they're commingled in the batch, if you're running a report, so the reports that I was just showing you, these batch reports, it will show the account code as opposed to the fund for those non-contribution items. And if you're running the totals by fund report, which is how several churches do their reconciliation, you will have the ability to select whether you want to see just the tax deductible, kind of the contribution items, or the non-contribution. And if you select non-contribution items in that, I'll show you what that looks like. So here, and maybe I don't, this isn't a great example because I think all of these are contributions. So if we had, you basically get the funds listed here. And then if you had one that was a non-contribution, it would, oh, this one, this $100 is a non-contribution. And it looks like, it's a non-contribution, but it looks like it's not, it doesn't have the account code listed, which is why. So I need to go and I'd need to go correct that, but it would list the non-contributions separately with their account code, not with their fund. And happy to expound upon that further if that's not clear.
All right, the next question is, can we pull a pledge comparison report multi-year?
The pledge, ask that again, Haley, sorry.
Can we pull a pledge comparison report across multiple years?
To be able to know how much somebody pledged it, you know, let's say in the 2020 general fund or the 2021 general fund.
I would guess so.
Mike, do we have a standard report for that?
We do have a standard report for that. It's a variation of the pledge fulfillment report. And currently, the way to pull that up is through the URL. So you add one fund / the other fund. There's information about that in the documentation on pledge fulfillment report toward the end of the article about how to pull up a report comparing two funds.
Thank you, Mike. There is a way that you'll be able to do that with a tool that we are in the process of building right now. If you were at last year's summit, we announced that we are building a new report builder tool. And we will be showcasing that this fall in Chicago and starting to show that off. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow you with you don't need to know SQL or Python or any kind of coding language. You'll just be able to select, I want to add a column to this export. And you could add a column that says, you know, total pledged to this fund. And you could add as many different columns on there as you wanted, including pledging, giving. There's going to be the ability to add columns related to attendance, involvements, all kinds of stuff, all your general columns. And it'll be very easy to build those reports without needing to know any kind of SQL there. That's something it's in development. We're going to be giving a preview of it at Summit, and we'll be rolling it out in phases that, you know, later in the fall.
And let's see here. I'm sorry, I got lost on exactly which question I was on. Okay, well, there's actually this one from Amy at Trustful. Why wouldn't, I think maybe she was referring back to an earlier time asking if someone could use the totals by fund and put a date range in. Amy, let me know if we haven't moved past that part of the conversation, or that looks like it was referencing something earlier.
Somebody's asking a question that I'm seeing that I'll just interrupt here, Haley, sorry, about deleting push pay contributions. By default, when you were importing push pay, they were importing as online. We added settings, Mike, when was this? Back in earlier part of the year, January, February. We added a lot of settings related to that push pay import. One of which is you can designate which bundle type it goes into. We do not recommend you putting it in online, but you create a bundle type called pushpay and you put it in there, and then that will give you all the functionality as if you were importing anything else. But if you put it in online is what has those restrictions because they're online items that we don't want you losing the history of. So that goes with any kind of import from an external source. So if you're using text to give or any kind of external giving platform, we recommend that you actually create a batch type. Sorry, I think I used the word bundle. We're no longer using bundles anymore. It's all batches. we recommend you creating a batch type for that specific type and put them in that batch type and not put them in as online.
Specifically for text to give, if you are a text to give church, you should now already have a text to give batch type on your system. And we've requested text to give to make a change on their end to do their import into those batch types now.
Yes.
All right, here's another one. Ellen Croster, we export to the general ledger by contribution date. Will total by fund still be available?
Total by fund will still be available, and that is an option. And this kind of goes to a bigger question of how will reconciliation happen after phase 2 is done? Before we did this, and people use a combination of the totals by fund report and the settlements report. Now you should be able to just use the totals by fund, or depending on how you reconcile, you could just use the batches search page like I showed you. I think Dava was the example. She said, how do I run a report, but all my items for 1 week? You put the date filter in, and then you mass export those. And there's a way that you can run that report by the actual contribution or entry date as well. So you can use the totals by fund report or the batch report, but either of those that you use should be enough to reconcile both online giving and event registrations in a much simpler manner than how you've had to do things in the past.
This one is from Wayne Brown, and it looks like he's asking for Mike specifically. So
am I talking too much, Wayne? Just kidding.
will I be able to break out the new batch reports by campus? And then this part's to Mike. Mike, you helped us edit our batch file to show totals by the campus that they are assigned to in TouchPoint. Will I have this ability going forward? And then Mike, I don't know if you're looking in the chat, but he did attach a screenshot as well.
It's not one of the published batch reports, but I do have a version of the batch report that does break things out by campus. So we can certainly make that available to you, Wayne.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then Priscilla, I think that there would be control issues from an audit perspective, granting too much edit access to online giving. It looks like she's just sharing her 2 cents there. Coming back to Jeffrey on the individual contributions, what is the solution for one that we cannot set to 0, do not want it to show on someone's giving tab, and need to delete it?
So it's an online gift that you.
It doesn't say online gift. It says individual contribution. What's the solution for one that we cannot set it to 0, do not want it to show on someone's giving tab, and we need to delete it? I think he's referring back to not being able to delete something if they're reopening a batch. That's my guess. Jeffrey, please correct me if I'm wrong.
Jeffrey, I'm happy to take this offline. I'm curious to know what the use case for this would be, and that might help answer the question. If you don't want to put the details in the chat, we can take it offline.
Will said he thinks he's talking about an online gift that is voided.
Can you not just go to the gift in the
Gotcha.
reverse it?
So this gets to the issue that we discussed a few days ago, Chris, about reversing transactions and the way it's displayed in the new batch. And we have discussed solutions to that, and we'll be rolling those out.
Yeah, so yes. How do I answer this? So the way that we as we've discussed with kind of more accounting professionals, some of the advice we've gotten is that you should actually be recording the positive and the negative to offset, just to make sure that there's a trail of everything. The challenge with that is and we've been able to solve this with TouchPoint giving, is that those two transactions, because they happen automatically through our fully integrated payment processor, they're linked together, and we are discussing adding a setting to be able to not show the negative and the positive on the contribution statement. But from a auditing trail standpoint and a visibility for a finance user, that has been advised of the way to do it. And so previously you used to be able to do a reversal, and that would actually change the type, but we've kind of moved away from that, and we are moving away from that. If you're not using the TouchPoint giving, it is going to show the positive and the negative. And that's because it's just really hard to link the two transactions, but we're still trying to figure out if there's a way that we could do that for non-TouchPoint giving. So that Jeffrey, hopefully will answer your question. Since you all are on TouchPoint giving, hopefully that is positive news for you. So
He had one more comment in there and said that'd be great as long as it does not show for the person.
that's what we're working towards. We're making some adjustments towards that still.
All right. Ethan from Salem for Refugees, our online batches are not currently matching with our bank deposits. I can see that some of our batches are mixed source, bank card, and ACH, and that some batches have contributions with different timestamps. Is there anything we need to reconfigure in our settings?
No, so that is correct today. When we roll out phase 2, and I see a question here about when do we expect phase 2 to be out, and I'll answer that next. When we roll out phase 2, then they should be matching what you're seeing in your bank. So that phase 1 was kind of laying the foundation for being able to do that, but we haven't rolled out phase 2 where those will match. So in regards to timeline, I have kind of a rough timeline that I can share with you. This is all pending testing, but we have already completed a number of steps of phase 2, including the soft credits, including the fund set rework, including everything going into a pending batch, and including non-contributions going into the batches. What we're working through and the challenges, all the payment processors are slightly different, but how the batching works so that all those go in batch properly is what is being worked on right now. We estimate that there's we should be done with that in one of the first weeks of August, but then there's a lot of testing, several weeks of testing in addition to the testing we've already been going through. So I would anticipate that we would be rolling that out probably towards the mid to late August at the earliest. And that's assuming everything goes very smoothly in all the testing. So I would say it's probably late August, just because, we're not going to roll this out until we're confident everything is working exactly how it should be.
All right, here's another question. Anita asks, can we limit funds to select by campus at the contribution level when we're entering contributions?
So when you're entering a contribution, can you?
I think she's asking, and then like restrict by only see the funds that are visible for this campus.
So that is not a current functionality. If that's an important thing to you all, I'm happy to discuss whether that's a future enhancement or a sponsored project or something, but right now that is not a functionality. You could group it might, depending on how you name the funds and or the numbers of the funds. That's how I see a lot of churches do it. It makes it easier to kind of see and know which campuses they're a part of. But because technically it's possible that you could commingle gifts from lots of different campuses all in the same batch, and it wouldn't matter, because it all, the reporting breaks it out after the fact, or can break it out after the fact. So that's not a current functionality.
We caught up. What other questions?
I have a request for the source when you're making a batch.
Yes.
And I just thought about this literally yesterday. We have ACH, bank card, mail, offering plate, but how about payroll deduction?
Yeah, you can add as many. We just added those standard ones, and every church can go in and add additional sources as they see fit.
Okay, I'll do that.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
So,
Is
and the
that
source thing, I'm sorry,
that under some setup?
it's in the
Lookup.
lookup codes.
Okay.
Yeah. So source is a new way. We heard some churches were actually creating several different batch types to be able to distinguish gifts. And churches wanted to say, no, I just want to put all my checks into one batch that's just for checks. But I want to know which ones came in through the 9 a.m. service or the 11 a.m. service or the 5 p.m. service. And so you can create as many of those sources as you want for that purpose so that you can simplify the batch types.
I don't necessarily need to designate them per batch, but I do like to, I loved being able to go in and say, these came in through the mail, this came in through the plate.
Yeah.
And so when I was doing this week, I was like, oh, these are payroll deductions. And so I would like to, yeah.
Yep.
Ellen is asking, can a new batch have the default date set for Sunday?
So when you're creating the new batch, you can control what that default date is, but I bet you're probably asking, can it just automatically be going back to the last Sunday?
I think that's what the old behavior was, Chris. I think when you created a new bundle, it went to the previous Sunday, whereas now it's just going to today. I see some people nodding, so I think that it's fine.
Well, we can look at that.
I'll add
Haley,
it to
can you
our
make sure that
list.
that's recorded? So,
Got it.
I'll tell you, I spent months learning the financial side of all of this. So, I thought I knew it well, and there are just so many little features here that I did not know prior to working with the team. And there was a big team that went into this to redesign this, including several of you on this call that gave us a lot of helpful feedback throughout the design phases. So thank you to all of the folks that were able, stepped up and gave us feedback. But I'll tell you, that's one I was not aware of. So thank you. We will look into that. It looks like
Clyde,
Allison's had her hand up a little while there.
okay.
Haley.
That's okay. Hey, I was just when you go to close a batch and it gives you a place for a reference number, what would I put there? What is that for?
It's an optional field. And what I'll say is, through this process, I found everybody uses that. That was a field that existed before, and churches use it for different things. So it will be used for online batches. It will put your batch number in there. That's what's going to happen in phase 2.
Okay.
But some churches have a number that corresponds to some kind of printed out sheet that summarizes things that their count team uses. Different churches use it for different things. There's several churches that don't use it at all. So it's really up to you and whether you want to
obviously
use that.
I've never used it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's where we are going to be putting the batch number when phase 2 rolls out.
Clive is asking, currently a return shows on the donor record, but not in the batch. Has that been fixed?
So I
think-
believe this is part of what we were talking about a few minutes ago, where we're actually, I think the documentation either should be updated soon or it hasn't. The ability to go and click a reverse or a return is not how we're recommending doing this. You should actually go through and actually create a negative contribution for those. So this automatically happens for TouchPoint giving because we have the front end, we own kind of both sides of it with the front end and the back end. We're able to pull in all those refunds or reversals or voids automatically. But for the non-TouchPoint giving processors, it's a manual process. And instead of going to the reversal, we're actually recommending that you go and offset it with a negative contribution.
Okay, so I still have the problem in TouchPoint giving when something is, because, you know, we were testing, we had an issue with one certain bank, right, a while back, and one certain credit union that didn't recognize any account numbers. And I've still got people that when their contribution was kicked back, in TouchPoint, it recorded it kicked back twice instead of just once, even though it was only kicked back from the bank once. So
that has been corrected on our side. And if you still have if you still have some of those, we can help you clean that up. So just
I do.
shoot. Mike, are you the right one actually?
Probably.
Yeah. Shoot Mike an email and
I'll shoot you an email, Mike.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
Ellen is asking, can reference field be listed by or in the batch entry area?
I believe it is. So I must be misunderstanding the question. I can show this. Let me go over here. So on the batch search page, the reference ID is showing here. But if I go, let me see here, clear this, and let me go open one. This one doesn't have a reference ID. If I'm on here, it does have the reference ID. And if I put a reference ID in there and I hit save, it's going to show that reference ID here on this page. But this is where you would go and edit that if you needed to. And then once you balance and close this, it will show here as well.
We've only got about 5-6 minutes left, so I'm going to try to keep us moving quickly. Will the notes field be corrected? It's not showing on the giving statements like previously.
Yes. In fact, I think my next call. So
Yes.
We have, this is one of the changes that we've made that I'm glad someone brought this up because I meant to cover this. So we introduced with the new online giving platform about 3 years ago, a concept of an internal, a system note versus a kind of a custom note, a donor note. And so we are making a change where all of your donor notes are now going into the custom note field, and the system notes are something that can't be edited but will show up on the contribution search page. And so bear with us. That my next meeting is actually finalizing that and all the details that go into that. And I would anticipate that will probably roll out with phase 2 as well. But we are working on the notes piece of that. So there are some kind of system notes that used to show on a statement that are no longer going to show on a statement. It will really be the notes that you enter will be the only notes that will show on a statement moving forward after we make these changes. So that's part of it, is we're kind of breaking out system notes versus a custom note or a donor note.
All right, couple more questions. How will late returns be reconciled in phase 2?
How will late returns be reconciled in phase 2? So in TouchPoint giving, those pull in automatically, and they go into a batch, just like all the other things for a batch ID. For the other processors, it slightly varies. Some of them put them in their own batch. I think most of them will commingle your refunds in a batch that already exists. And so you will have a few batches that do not match up perfectly. And that's where you'll need to go in and put that negative contribution in there. That's part of why we're doing this whole positive and negative to offset so that those will balance, and you'll need to go manually put that -1 in the correct batch, which your payment process, your non-touchpoint your non-touchpoint giving payment processors should be notifying you in which batch those are going into, so that you can go in and add them.
All right, and Debbie is asking, will there be an option to create an online batch manually and move transactions as necessary?
So, this is one of those, we're having some internal debate right now where you've noticed you can't create manual online because online means online and it's processed through TouchPoint. Previously, that was much more broadly defined, which created some issues where you have churches that are commingling things that process online with, things that process through push pay or through text to give or all these things. And it was a lot of work for you all to manually split those out. We recommend that you actually put those in separate batches so that you're not having to manually move all of those things around. So, Debbie, we haven't made a hard decision on this, but we're leaning towards right now not allowing you to manually create online because those are automatically created by the system. And but if there's a use case, I would love to talk through that or hear the justification for that. You can create another batch type that is online, and you could name it online something else that is, if you needed to have that categorized that way. So that is a solution that we've seen some churches do for their other online batches that are truly not processed through TouchPoint through an integrated payment processor. So that might be one solution.
And then Jeffrey has, I think this is a question, but I think this is something that you were talking about already. We not being able to match imported contributions with transaction IDs.
Can't match imported contributions with transaction IDs. I'm not sure what that means, but Mike looks like maybe he does.
That I'm guessing that refers to when a file is uploaded with contributions from outside of TouchPoint to get those contributions into TouchPoint. And so those uploads typically will, in some cases, give transaction IDs or names of donors that can't be matched or something like that in the system notes field. And now that we're only displaying the donor notes field, those are no longer visible at the end of the import process. So depending on the decisions that we reach about how to handle that, we'll adjust those upload scripts so that information is visible to you.
And I know we're at the top of the hour, but that it brings up one more thing that I just wanted to make sure I call out. Several of you that I've spoken to over the last several weeks, I've realized are manually entering gifts that may be given through either an external processor, even manually entering gifts like cash and check. We do have an import process that is very robust. It can be customized and matched. And if you're using donor IDs or things that can match to an individual, it can greatly simplify the amount of time. I mean, I think there was one guy that I spoke to, I think he was on the call earlier, that it saved him like 3 hours a week by him. He just hadn't ever set that up or didn't know about that feature. The other thing is our check scanning. We have the ability to scan checks in and it will pull all of that in and match to the donor if it's the second time that it's been associated, which can save you also a lot of time. And there's a feature that we rolled out earlier this year called Scan and Deposit. This is a really great feature. It's included with if you're a TouchPoint giving church, there may be a few small additional fees if you're not a TouchPoint giving church, but basically you can scan your checks into TouchPoint and with a click of a button, deposit those into a CAS bank account. And if you're not familiar with our Our new parent company has a bank as part of it that focuses solely on serving churches. And if you haven't heard us talk about that and the kingdom flow of funds, and I would encourage you to check that out. They're an amazing team. It's been really great being a part of the broader CAS family as they strive to serve the church and have the same heart for the church that we do at TouchPoint. And they have just been such a great partner and allowed us to add some really great tools that can simplify your check scanning and bank deposit processes. So that's something I would encourage you to check out if you're interested in. So I think we're over there, but I just wanted to make sure people knew about those features because it's time-saving things that could give you back hours of your day, which that's our goal. Our heart at TouchPoint is we want to make the software so easy to use. We want to make your jobs easier. We want to make you more efficient so that you can focus on serving, loving, caring for people that God has entrusted to you in your city. And so, any ways that we can help streamline your job, that's what our goal is.
Chris, like you said, I know we're over. Do you want to touch on the dates for phase 2 and phase 3?
Yeah, so I mentioned it briefly. We're talking about phase 2, hopefully rolling out sometime in mid to late August, and then phase 3. It's a little ambitious, but we're trying to get it out by Summit. Those are not set in stone. It's all pending testing and everything, but that's our kind of rough plan right now. And Summit, just so you know, is in kind of mid to late September. If you're not aware of Summit or not signed up or want to learn more, you can go to summit.touchpointsoftware.com and check that out. We're going to be in Chicago at our great partners at Village Bible and Park Community Church are co-hosting us there, and we're really excited to be together in person this fall. So thank you everyone for joining. We're going to stop the recording. I don't mind staying on for a few more minutes if people have